my first question. And some of these, I feel like maybe some of the other questions like will be answered with one question, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But is there a more common reason that you find for this to happen in the first place, for families to be in this situation where their DFCS is seizing their children? Like, is there a more common theme, and is it children who are medically fragile?
So the short answer to that question is all the families that we are currently supporting here at You Are the Power all have medically fragile children.
Okay.
And so that is the foundational common denominator. However, the underlying or the overreaching aspect of these cases is all these families have encountered a child abuse pediatrician. And so the child abuse, that practice of medicine is relatively new. I want to say it came about or was officially recognized in 2009. But since then, the reports of alleged abuse at the hands of medical professionals, right, or the reports of abuse by medical professionals has increased almost 50%, 50%. Wow. And so this, in our opinion, these child abuse pediatricians, I mean, there's only 6 in Georgia. There's 5 at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and then there's 1 in a facility outside Metro Atlanta. They're fracturing families. I mean, these are misdiagnoses all around. Mm-hmm. And we have such a difficult time trying to convince them otherwise. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that we have uncovered as well is specifically with the child abuse pediatricians, and this is a common denominator, the child abuse pediatricians at CHOA are well funded. And what I mean by that is the new Center for Safety and Healthy Children at CHOA carries the name of Stephanie Blank. If you guys are familiar with Arthur Blank is the billionaire who owns the Atlanta Falcons and Home Depot. And so Arthur Blank gives millions upon millions of dollars to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for this new facility for the Center for Safe and Healthy Children. But lo and behold, you know who sits on the a task force to help combat child trafficking is Governor Kemp's wife, Marty Kemp. And who also sits on that same board is Stephanie Blank and doctors and nurses from CHOA. Wow. So that is what we're up against here in Georgia is a large amount of money and is a political machine that a handful of us are trying to combat. And so it makes our job all the more challenging. Now, we're not going to stop. We're going to draw attention to this. But those are some of the issues that we're facing. And that's one of the reasons why we believe that Governor Kemp is not responding to us, because it makes his government, it makes his state government money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you start hitting a politician with their reputation, or you start hitting a politician in their pocketbooks, they'll start to listen to you. But there's so much money being funneled into the system that, the governor is just purposefully silencing his ears or plugging his ears so what we're saying can't be heard. So he's not leading his state at all, basically. No. In the right direction, at least. No, it's in our opinion, and it is a failure to lead, and it is a failure to lead on behalf of the governor that is further perpetuating these injustices. Yep. And it's why families like, Brady and Carey and the Alexander family in Pike County, or the Hernandez family in Forsyth County, or the Whiting Clark family, or the Sullivan family in Camden County are literally going bankrupt trying to defend themselves. Wow. They have spent their life savings. In all their instances, they're going in debt. There's another family that we've been helping, Casey and Bailey Collins. They're in Troup County, Georgia. They spent over $100,000. Same situation, medically fragile child, child abuse pediatrician at CHOA. So the state has the means and the wherewithal to continue this fight and carry this fight on for years upon years upon years, whereas these families don't have the financial means to do so, and a lot of them are going bankrupt as a result.
Do any of them have GoFundMes or accounts set up?
There are, yeah. So there are some that do GoFundMe accounts. There's some that have set up GiveSendGo accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do our very best to help raise awareness and help raise money for these families. We have attorneys that we work with that offer their services pro bono or at a reduced rate, to try to help these families out the best that they can. But again, we're up against a machine where you have, billionaires donating money to hospitals and governors' wives on boards and doctors on boards. And, there's just, like I said, there's a handful of us here in Georgia that are helping these families. And, obviously we don't have, hundreds of thousands or, millions of dollars to help support these families, but we do our very best with what limited resources that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a few questions. I feel like I've got a couple questions that kind of pertain to one thing and a couple that pertain to something else. But
Sure.
I wanted to know, number one, could you maybe define for the listeners, like, what medically fragile means, or, just kind of put it in make it a more clear idea for us?
Sure, absolutely. So when we say medically fragile, when I say medically fragile, what you have is a child who has been diagnosed with a medical condition, either in utero or once the baby has been born, has multiple medical diagnoses, multiple health concerns. And so when we say medically fragile, most of these babies, for the moms that we're supporting, had traumatic births. They had instances where, let's say medically fragile might be intrauterine growth restriction, which means, the baby in the placenta is not getting enough blood or enough oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
You might have genetic disorders such as OI or EDS. You might have vitamin D deficiencies that were passed along from the mom to the baby in utero. There might be some other underlying health conditions, such as maybe heart murmurs. You might have issues with the baby's bones developing properly, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So when we say medically fragile is these babies typically at around 6 to 7 weeks old, when they really start moving, right? When they start maybe moving their hands, kicking their legs, are a little more aware, start presenting with symptoms, right? They'll start crying. There might be discoloration of the skin because of genetic disorders. There might be swelling of the legs or joints because of genetic disorders. And so moms and dads take their babies to pediatricians and doctor upon doctor, trying to understand what's going on with their baby, trying to get their baby the help that they need. And so when these moms and dads are ultimately referred by pediatricians because pediatricians are having a difficult time with some of these conditions, refer these families to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they get to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, they start, the doctors start doing full workups, taking blood, doing x-rays and things of that nature. And that's when, like with Brady and Carrie, baby Jameson had rib fractures in various stages of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if Dr. Brown would have done her due diligence and would have known that Jameson had a vitamin D deficiency, that, it was quite possible that he had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and that those rib fractures likely occurred in utero or while Carrie was giving birth to Jameson.
Right. Yep.
So the way it was kind of explained to me, and it makes perfect sense, I listened to testimony of Dr. Hollick in the Alexander trial. And Dr. Hollick said, think of your bones as like if you're building a bridge. You build a bridge and you use steel and rebar and you have this strong foundation. But he said, these babies with this vitamin D deficiency, and in the vast majority of the babies in the cases that we're helping do, he said their bones are not steel, their bones are plastic. And he said for the rest of their lives, because of these genetic disorders combined with the vitamin D deficiency, these babies for the rest of their lives are going to be susceptible to breaking bones. And
Mm-hmm.
a baby can break its bones because their bones are so fragile. At 6 or 7 weeks old, these babies can have their bones broken by simply everyday handling.
Mm-hmm.
Mom picking the baby up to breastfeed, mom putting
Yep.
a onesie on the baby, mom putting the baby, getting the baby in and out, or dad getting the baby in and out of the car seat. And so that's what we mean by medically fragile.
Yep. Okay. That makes total sense. And my first thought is that for any family that is dealing with this, but, you know, some of the families are fortunate enough to have family members or grandparents that they can have adopt the children. But
Yes.
for any and all families that are dealing with it, when you already have a medically fragile child, baby, a brand new baby, and this happens, it's like, and then we're going to put them in a system where you're not sure that the adults that are supposed to love and take care of them are going to treat this properly.
Right.
And then you have families that are separated. So mentally and physically, like, is the child going to be able to get healthier and sustain what they're already dealing with? But I would imagine that typically just the emotional and mental toll that this takes on a child being separated from their mother or father, how is this baby ever going to get healthy? Like, for me, it sickens me. Like, all the thoughts running through my head right now. I need a punching bag. I really need a punching bag right now.
No, I'm with you. And I'll give you an example. Corey and Diana Sullivan, they live in Camden County. It's a family that we've been helping. They have 3 children. They were all born through IVF. Corey and Diana spent, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars having their 3 children. They had a 4-year-old, and then they got pregnant with their 2 twins, Christian and Amelia. Christian and Amelia were medically fragile. Amelia and Christian had separate placentas. And so Christian was growing and developed properly where Amelia was not. As a matter of fact, doctors told Diana if she were to deliver her twins naturally, it would likely break every bone in Amelia's body. When her twins were born, Amelia weighed not quite 4 pounds. She spent her first 42 days of life inside a NICU. When she was diagnosed, when she was discharged, she was still experiencing health issues. They took Amelia to the doctor. Doctor recommended that they go to a children's hospital in Florida, Wilson's Children's Hospital. Again, Corey and Diana ran into a child abuse pediatrician, Dr. Barbara Knox. And I'll let your listeners, and you do the research on Barbara Knox. She's been fired or resigned from just about every hospital that she's worked at.
Wow.
For misdiagnosing, for bullying her staff, for trying to get her staff to lie and claim where there were allegations of abuse where none existed. But as a matter of fact, Dr. Knox diagnosed Amelia as having been abused. At the time, Amelia weighed about 7 pounds. In her report, or when she was talking to Diana, Dr. Knox said, "It looks like someone must have drop-kicked your baby or slammed your baby against a wall."
Oh, my goodness.
Which, of course, didn't happen, right? None of this happened. And so, again, DFACS is notified. Law enforcement is notified. Corey and Diana have all 3 of their babies seized. State's trying to terminate their parental rights. The state wants to put all 3 of their babies up for adoption. And we're doing everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
To make an already tragic situation even worse, right? Because they can't see their children. A juvenile court judge in Camden County ordered Corey and Diana to pay $2,200 a month in child support that doesn't go to their own children.
Wow. Oh, my goodness.
In order to keep their children out of the state's foster care system, again, because it's completely broken, Corey and Diana moved out of their own home, allowed Diana's mom to move in, and then Diana's mom is currently taking care of the children. However, Corey and Diana are still paying the mortgage on their home. They're paying out the child support and paying all the bills for their babies, even though that they can only see their children. Diana can only see her children in a visitation center. Corey can see 2 of his 3 children, but he's not allowed to see Amelia because he's been accused of abusing her.
And all of the loops they're jumping through on a literal every single day basis are 100. I'm being sarcastic. 100% typical behavior of parents that abuse their children.
Yeah.
Correct. You'll see.
And I'm finding this to be a common thing with all of the families. Like,
yes.
yeah, all of their behavior and all of the miles they're having to go every single day are totally normal for parents that abuse their children.
Yeah.
Like, that is totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
Not.
These families have brought their babies, before they were seized, had brought their babies to the doctor on average of about 6 or 7 times, trying to figure out
what's wrong with their baby, how they can help their baby.
Right. What is wrong with my baby? Can you please tell me what's wrong with my baby? One of the most tragic things, or not tragic, but it's so sad, is that while Diana was breastfeeding Amelia, Child Protective Services and hospital staff came in there and literally ripped baby Amelia out of her arms, off her breast, and escorted Corey and Diana out of the hospital. Corey said that his wife started screaming so loud that nurses from the nursing station came running into the room trying to figure out what was going on, why Diana was screaming so loud. I mean, these mothers and these fathers are nothing short of loving parents. And they're factually innocent. Like, none of these crimes occurred. I mean, the state is literally making up crimes. DFACS is literally making up crimes based on the opinion of a child abuse pediatrician. And the state is seizing these children, and they're reaping the medical benefits for it through these Title IV funds.
So my next question, as it pertains to, I actually have like a whole lot of questions about this whole child abuse pediatric situation, but I'm gonna go with the 2 that I wrote down because I feel like we might need to do like 3 episodes on this.
Yeah, I'm available. I want to get this out there, so if we need to do 2 or 3 more episodes,
yeah. But so I want to know, and I totally understand that you might, for any number of reasons, might not want to go into too much detail, but early on in the interview, when you were kind of just sharing everything, you mentioned that the Dr. Brown had a questionable background. Can you go into detail on that, or like even if it's just a couple of instances, and then also to follow up with that, has Dr. Brown given any comments, any reactions, any follow-up? Has she shown any interest or any investment for her personally in the care of Jameson? Does she show any care in how he is doing, where he is, medically, also physically, like?
Sure.
And is she still working?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll address the first one, which is when I say questionable background. At the time, she was not a certified child abuse pediatrician. She is a board certified sex therapist. She's a doctor as well, but at the time, her specialty was helping couples work through sexual issues in their relationship and marriage and things of that nature. She just wanted to get involved in the specialty of child abuse pediatrics. So she was working under the tutelage of someone else. And so one of the things that, when I say questionable background, is she's been reprimanded for some of her social media posts, some of the activities that she's involved with, or outside of her practice of medicine. Modeling and things of that nature has warranted unwanted attention for some of the hospitals that she's worked at.
May I ask if it's OnlyFans?
It's not.
Okay.
It's not.
I just had to.
It's not. She participates in beauty pageants and things like that, and so there's just been some of her actions have drawn unwarranted attention to the hospitals that she's worked at.
Gotcha.
On the second part of your question is, at no point has she nor has any of these child abuse pediatricians ever followed up with the families. None of these child abuse pediatricians have ever asked how the babies are doing. As a matter of fact, once they make the diagnosis of non-accidental trauma, they pretty much wash their hands of the case and do nothing else. Very rarely do you see them order secondary testing, third testing. Once they make the diagnosis of non-accidental trauma, that is it. That ends their involvement in these cases, other than perhaps coming to court and testifying on behalf of the state.
Oh, wow.
Is she still employed?
She is still employed.
May I ask also what her doctorate degree is in, or like what mushy brain, like what she got her doctorate in, what part of medicine?
Yeah, so she's an MD, and
kind of she chose to like use that, and her main interest for her career up until recently was sex therapist.
Yeah, she's a board certified.
Okay.
Yeah, she's board certified pediatrician, and so her specialty at the time was not child abuse protocol.
Gotcha.
She works at the same Stephanie V. Blank Center for Safe and Healthy Children, the one we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That gets funded by the billionaire Arthur Blank. But so she still practices, and I have not seen any child abuse pediatrician follow up and ask of the mom and dad how their son or daughter is. It's never occurred.
I just thought of another question. So if the child abuse pediatric practice, once they give, from what I'm understanding, most of them will give the diagnosis of what is it?
The non-accidental trauma?
Yes, non-accidental trauma. And then they basically don't do anything else or anything, and then the state gets involved.
Yeah.
From what I'm hearing, there is no way even for the parents to then truly really be able to get secondary testing, third testing. Like, the state isn't doing that either, right?
Correct. And parents ask for it time and time again, and it is denied by DFACS because DFACS says it is medically unnecessary because they have the diagnosis of abuse, and that's really the only thing that they care about.
Wow.
So in some instances, they might, the judge might say, hey, let's do some, we're going to order some genetic testing. Rather than do a full panel of genetic testing, they might just do a real basic panel just to satisfy the judge's requirement. But there's really no medical investigative follow-up, because you have to understand, like, a child abuse pediatrician, they're not a criminal investigator, right? They do not know by law in Georgia what constitutes abuse, what doesn't constitute abuse, what the elements of the crime for abuse are. So they base their findings a lot of the time on mathematical probability.
Mm-hmm.
So they look and say, well, there's a rib fracture, and so that means it's 70% likely that this child was abused. And then they stop. They don't look at the other 30% and say, well, there's a 30% chance that there was an underlying health condition, that this baby was medically fragile.
Yes.
Right? So they just play the numbers mathematically, and in doing so, they ruin lives.
Yes. No, it's almost like if I can see where child abuse pediatrics could be very useful and very helpful. Yes. But it's almost like there needs to be a team, not just one individual or one doctor, almost like an investigator, an attorney, and two doctors.
Yeah.
And as a unit, they do their job do the due diligence for each individual child and each individual case.
One of the things that we at You Are the Power are suggesting for reform, right? Because it's going to have to come from the General Assembly of Georgia Legislature to make this happen. So, like, one of the things that we are recommending, right? Because we don't do politics. We're a nonprofit. But one of the things that we're recommending, and just putting this out in the public domain, is that once a child abuse pediatrician says that this is non-accidental trauma, that should trigger an independent board of doctors to review that diagnosis.
I agree.
Right?
Yes.
It should be 3 to 5 other doctors,
Yes.
independent, right? Independent of that hospital, who look at the x-rays, who look at the medical reports, who look at the birth mother's OBGYN records, who look at the totality of everything and say, all right, so my opinion is it's more likely than not that this is not abuse, or my opinion is more probable not that it is. But relying solely on the opinion of one doctor, and especially in a case like Brady and Carrie, where that particular doctor has a somewhat questionable background. That particular doctor wasn't yet certified, board certified in child abuse pediatrics.
Yep.
Why was that doctor allowed to make that diagnosis, and why did no one else question that?
Yep, I agree. I love the idea and what you guys are working toward in the changes of having an independent group of doctors. And I also find me having 3 children, I feel like it would be beneficial if the independent group isn't all pediatrics that just have to go through the OBGYN like records of the mother, but also like having an OBGYN in that group that can explain like, hey, I have seen this and I know this can happen, and I studied a case of this type of pregnancy, just so that maybe the OBGYN can really explain it from their point of view. Yes. And then the pediatric doctors can also read those files and all the records, and as a whole unit come up with what is truly feasible and truly what might be or more than likely happened or happening, instead of, like you said, just the one individual doctor. To me, that is great. Like,
it is.
Even for me, like, I'm a grown woman, and if something's wrong with me and I know something's wrong with me, I will go to my doctor first. And usually my doctor is actually going to say, like, here, you need to go see this specialist. Or we need to try this. It's not just going to be a one thing said and done. And if it is, then I'm probably going to find a new doctor.
Absolutely.
It's just mind-blowing to me that this is happening. It's crazy.
One of the things that we're recommending as well, besides an independent panel of doctors, is we want radiologists to review these records, board-certified radiologists, because these child abuse pediatricians, they're not board-certified radiologists.
Yep.
And so they're looking at these X-rays and saying, well, that might be a spinal fracture, or that looks like a rib fracture, but it could be cupping. We don't know.
Yep.
So we want a radiologist to review these records as well, because a lot of these diagnoses of non-accidental trauma are coming from radiology.
So, being that we are true crime, and I consider this true crime because there are crimes being committed, in my opinion. In the criminal world, we would call that like basically like a DNA analysis, right? Like, somebody might be able to go and get a fingerprint or do blood, but you have someone that deals with the blood, somebody that deals with fingerprints, somebody that deals with sketches, somebody that deals with just crime scene overall.
Yes.
A radiologist would be able to see the x-rays and say, this was something that happened and something must have been wrong with the bones, because the way that this is showing, this was maybe just a movement of some sort that didn't agree with their bones or bone structure, versus this was blunt force trauma.
Right. And the sad reality about child abuse pediatricians, they are allowed to speculate as to how something occurred and put that, and they chart that. Just like Dr. Knox saying, well, it looks like, baby Amelia was, drop kicked or thrown into a wall. Or, doctors speculate, right, on some of these rib injuries, and they'll say, well, it would have, in order to break an infant's ribs, you would require the force of a motor vehicle accident. A parent would have had to punch that baby in the rib with the force of
Right.
And that's pure speculation. And that doesn't fly in criminal court, but it is allowed to be admitted in juvenile court and family court because
yep.
hearsay is admissible, right?
Yep.
And the burden of proof in family court, is the preponderance of evidence, at least in Georgia, whereas the burden of proof in criminal court is proof beyond reasonable doubt.
Exactly.
And so these doctors come in and they give opinion. They're not stating fact, but juvenile court judges and prosecutors are taking a child abuse pediatrician's opinion as if it were fact. When in fact it is nothing more than a mathematical opinion.
And honestly, even if it's just mathematical, there hasn't been enough study and problem solving and troubleshooting to even determine a legitimate opinion. And in my opinion, as a medical doctor, you would think that you would want a little bit more proof to actually put your name behind something that is actually tearing families apart. To me, you're not a doctor. You're not doing what you said you would do.
I'll give you an example of something that actually shocked my conscience when I was in court and witnessed or sat in court for the Alexander trial in Pike County. This was the first time in 22 years that I participated in a trial where law enforcement did not testify. And so let me explain what that means. Law enforcement, when you take a case to a grand jury, when you make an arrest, the law enforcement is the initial prosecutor. They're the ones that develop the probable cause to make the arrest to jumpstart the criminal case before it's kicked over to the district attorney's office for prosecution. At no point during trial did law enforcement testify against Terrellyn and Tyler Alexander. Not once. As a matter of fact, the lead investigator on the case never even stepped foot in the courthouse. Not the courtroom, not even the courthouse. The only people that testified on behalf of the state, there was a DFACS worker, there was a child abuse pediatrician, and there was a radiologist. Those are the ones who sent, those three people, the testimony of those three people are the ones who sent Tyler and Terrellyn Alexander to prison under a 15-year sentence. At no point did law enforcement testify. So that tells me, because I've been involved in Georgia's criminal legal system for over 2 decades, that tells me that child abuse pediatricians and radiologists from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta are now state agents.
Yes.
They are the ones prosecuting moms and dads.
Yep, they're doing jobs that they didn't take an oath to do.
Correct.
And not doing their job.
And not doing
the oath that they did take.
Exactly. They're doing the complete opposite.
They're doing the exact opposite.
So I have one more question as it pertains to the Tims. And I just want our listeners to really understand, because I feel like as a parent, when I hear all of this and know and read about this case and stuff, I'm thinking, okay, this is absolutely terrible. I'm heartbroken, all of the things, all the emotions. I'm going to need a therapy session after this. Because I want to punch somebody in the face. But it's I think as a mom, it just literally strikes your heart so much. But when I hear that, for the families that have family members that were able to adopt, they're not just the child that the case is really revolving around, but all of the children. As a mom, I think if I'm in this situation, of course I'm still heartbroken, but I know that, okay, my child is taken care of, they're with my family, and yes, it is absolutely terrible that I can't see them, but they're with my family.
Right.
So in order for... And I also feel like as moms, we are kind of machines, and we can very much separate our emotions when we know that we have something that we have to get done or conquer. So for our listeners, because I would say a lot of them are parents or moms, I really want to know, what does it look like? Because even if the grandparents in the case have custody of the child, so in Jamison's situation,
yes,
what does it look like from a standpoint of Carrie and Brady are not in custody of they're not in jail or prison? Correct. What does their relationship look like with their son Jamison, even though Brady's parents have custody or have adopted the child?
Yeah. So the relationship, I'll there, and I'm not. I know you're not speaking about their marriage, but you talk about the relationship with
Jamison. Yes, yes,
Okay.
because the parents Brady and Carrie, they aren't in state custody,
Right.
and Brady's parents, so the grandparents of Jamison, have custody or have adopted. What does Brady and Carrie, the mom and dad, what does it look like with their son Jamison, and how often, if you can speak on it, how often do they get to see him, if at all?
Sure, and I can equate it to what I'll say is I'll equate it to like my wife and her relationship with our children. When our babies were younger, there was a special bond between mom and child. Right, it exists, it is there, and so you can see that bond, or I saw that bond with my wife and our children. Like when she walked into a room, the babies would go running up, like, hey, it's mom. And,
Yep.
Like there's that immediate recognition. There's no hesitation.
Yep.
But what I've seen, this is my personal observation, the relationship that I see between, and I've been around Brady and Carrie and when they have Jamison, is there's not a moment that I have been around them where Brady and Carrie didn't radiate love towards Jamison.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a moment that I've been around them where Brady and Carrie didn't hold Jamison and that love was not reciprocated, right? So Jamison is still trying to process as a 3-year-old why he can't go home to mom and dad, right? Why he has to see mommy and daddy only in public settings or with other people around.
Right.
And so there's that invisible barrier, I guess, that doesn't exist between a mom and her children or a dad and their children when they have not been taken away by the state. And so that invisible barrier is there, and Brady and Carrie have to contend with it every time they're around Jamison. And to their credit and to their family's credit, is they're as comfortable as possible in the most uncomfortable of situations.
Right.
And that's what I mean when I say they're good people. There's not, like I said, I'm getting ready to go have dinner with Brady and Carrie, right? But there's not a time where I've been around them where they're not talking about Jamison, where they're not doing something on behalf of Jamison, where they're not thinking about, hey, I'm going to go see him. Where Brady and Carrie are not talking about, hey, we're going to get to go see, Brady's son from a previous relationship, Tilson. They're talking about, hey, we get to go see Tilson this weekend. It's our weekend with Tilson. Like, they are doing everything in their power to not let the situation that they are in right now adversely impact their relationship with their boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, that is what's so touching about all this is, even though there is that invisible barrier that's present, right, because the boys can't come home to Brady and Carrie and things of that nature, they're doing their very best to be the mom and dad that they want to be to their sons.
They're putting their children first.
Yeah, they absolutely are putting their children first.
Yep.
They are the most selfless people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, Brady works 2 and 3 jobs at a time. He might leave the house at 6 o'clock in the morning and come home at like 9, 10 o'clock at night because he goes do extra work outside of his normal Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're doing everything in their power. And that's one of the things that when we talk about these stories, when we talk about human respect, and we want that human respect restored because that has been taken away by the government.
Yes.
That's one of the things that we're talking about is, we approach everything through love and compassion and understanding. And not only has the state fractured these families, they're harming these children. They're harming Tilson. They're harming Jamison.
Mm-hmm.
And we just want the district attorney, we want these chiefs of police, we want these DFACS workers, we want the governor to see this. We
Mm-hmm.
want them to see what their policy and procedures, how they are adversely impacting these families and how they are fracturing these families based off of a misdiagnosis by a child abuse pediatrician.
I love the work that you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of answered my last question with that, but I wanted to say, like, this whole time, so a lot of the cases that we cover, if they are not like missing children or children that have been unalived, most of the cases that we deal with have some sort of, if not a very close connection to addiction. And as I'm listening about the system and how it is so broken, and how the Title IV funds, like how that's involved, like, to me, I'm not comparing them to say they are the same. Sure. But to me, there are comparisons in the opioid epidemic and Big Pharma. We're going to pay doctors more to prescribe these medicines that are not medically necessary, or do that first. And then, I mean, we've all seen what the opioid epidemic and, pill mills and all these things have done. And it's just, to me, this is a whole, not to say one is worse than the other, one is better than the other, like, none of that, but just to say, like, we really need to make sure that the people that we are electing into office and into these power positions are looking at every human that they are representing.
Yes.
Child, adult, no matter what race, no matter what gender, no matter what sexual orientation. We really need to pay attention and do our due diligence and research of what do they care about every beating heart that they are saying they're going to fight for.
Exactly. With the opioid, and you hit the nail on the head there, like with the opioid epidemic and Big Pharma, money incentivized evil.
Yep.
Money incentivized those doctors making those, writing those prescriptions that were unnecessary, prescriptions that decimated the southeastern portions of the United States.
Yep.
And what we're seeing here in Georgia is that equivalent. Money is incentivizing these evil decisions that these politicians, that these appointed officials are making. These caseworkers down on the in the weeds at the very lowest level of DFACS are making poor decisions because those high above them are incentivized by money.
100%. And money, at the root of all evil, money is in both instances with the opioid epidemic and addiction. And in this case, and it's, I know you specifically do 10 states, I believe you said, or over 10 states. And the cases we have just talked about are all in Georgia, but this is obviously happening all across the United States too. In both cases, money is very much involved and is very much, there are incentives, but at the root of both of them, it is ripping families to shreds.
Yes. I spoke with two mothers in Kentucky this week who are experiencing the same nightmare as Brady and Carrie and the rest of the families in Georgia. And, just scratching the surface on some of these cases with these mothers in Kentucky. Again, money is the root of what's driving these, driving the seizures of these children, and determination of parental rights and the ultimate adoption of innocent babies.
Oh my gosh!
Wow,
you're an angel.
Yeah, for real.
So we, I'm just, and I say this with nothing but humility, is that I'm thankful to be in a position to help these families. I'm fortunate enough to where I'm in a position in my life to where I can but volunteer so many hours of my time per week. Mm-hmm. When I tell these families, and like I said, at the very beginning of this interview was, one of the most gratifying phone calls I get to make is, when I say your family is now our family and your babies are now our baby. Mm-hmm. When these families have fundraising events, when these families need our support, when these families need to do our Brady and Carrie and Matt Tucky Hernandez, and we're going to go out to dinner. We're planning. I spoke with Natalie about this. I think yesterday or maybe the day before about we're planning an adventure day out where we're going to take the families out for maybe rafting or tubing or ziplining or something like that. But we're in a position with You Are the Power, and I'm in a position with You Are the Power to where we can offer these services to these families, and that what makes our organization so unique is we're all volunteers. I don't get paid to do this.
Yeah.
I don't get paid to do any of this. And the Georgia support team, we have a fantastic team. Jonathan and Jennifer Williams, Mandy, Jenny's sister. I mean, they dedicate probably 20 or 30 hours of their lives each week to supporting these families. Jonathan, who's one of the volunteer members of he's a pharmacist. Jenny's a photographer. Mandy helps her husband with her business. But I just want to express that it's always about the restoration of human respect and love and empathy. It drives everything that we do.
Absolutely. Yeah, y'all are doing great work, and we are happy to have been able to talk with you and really get involved, because I'm like, oh, what do we do next? What do we do next? How do we help? How can we share? So I'm really appreciative, both of us, Natalie and me, just of your time and your willingness to help people, and because it's not easy, and it's hard. It's a lot of time, but I feel like good people know good people, and it's very clear that you and everyone that you work with and work around are all, really just doing the best thing they can for humanity, especially when it's been kind of turned on its head. So just personally, I really appreciate you. It's amazing, and we'll do anything we can to help and support you guys and the families, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just thank you guys so much for having me on. Thank you guys for allowing me to share these stories with your audience. If anyone from your audience has any questions, please, like I said, go to youarethepower.net/GA, and then you can read a little bit more about the stories and the families that we're helping. I will, if you don't mind, I'll give my email address out right now. I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody might have. Like I said, I'm responsible for covering 10 states in the Southeast. And so some of your listeners, they might have questions or might have concerns or might be experiencing these issues and don't know who to turn to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So my email address is Ryan, RYAN, .Ralston, RALSTON, at youarethepower.net. And I can't thank you enough for having me on and allowing me to share these stories and share our work with your audience. This is amazing.
Well, we're going to have you on again, because we could talk to you for hours. I think this is probably going to be a 2-episode series, so it'll be out this Monday and next Monday. So make sure to tell the Tims and all your families that information, and then I'll just text you about I got your email with your bio and your picture and everything, so that's all good.
Yeah, we'll make sure and reach out about anything, because we definitely want to stay involved and do whatever we can to help get the word out, give it exposure, but also just genuinely just help, because we're in Chattanooga, so we're right next to Georgia.
Yeah, you're right down the road. And I will say this, you guys are good people. You guys are just absolutely good people, and I can't thank you enough for an opportunity to come on your show. This has been amazing. And if you need to have me back, I'll be glad to return. If you need any information from me, shoot me a text, send me an email. I'll help any way I can.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
And tell the Tims we said hi and we love them and we're thinking and praying about them.
Yep.
Thank you. I will do that. We'll be sitting down for dinner in about an hour and a half.
Awesome. Right. Well, thank you so much, and have a great one.
All right. Y'all have a great weekend. Thank y'all.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Holy shit.
I am freaking mind blown.